right. Okay, another meeting of the Audiovisual Club will now go into recess. We'll come back to the presentations in our program. And one of our up-and-coming software guys has brought his whole team up here, or what's left of the team, to talk about Led Zeppelin. Please welcome Tim Sexton.
Thank you for that introduction, David. I'd like to thank everyone for coming here. Thank Rob and the entire Expo staff and all the volunteers for putting on a great show. I think everyone's had a lot of fun so far and still a lot more pinball to play today, so should be a lot of fun. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tim Sexton. I was the lead game developer for Led Zeppelin Pinball. And up here, if everyone would want to introduce themselves.
Test. Raymond Davidson. I did support programming on Led Zeppelin Pinball.
Mike Vinikour, associate game developer. I did the XLites on Led Zeppelin.
I'm Elliot Eismin, mechanical engineer. Did support engineering for the game.
And I'm Corey Stup, and I did some of the system sound development to make Led Zeppelin the fun game it is.
So today, this is just a small sampling of the team. We have a ton of people at Stern Pinball who are responsible for every little piece of the game development. So this is just a few of the people who made this happen, but we're going to talk about what we contributed. It's going to be a more technical focused presentation because everyone up here is involved in the engineering aspect of the game. So the overview of the talk, we're going to talk about the software initial rules, concepts, license concepts, design development. We're going to go into detail on two of the major devices on the game, the expression lighting system that is available on the Premium and LE games and the Pro as an accessory kit, the Electric Magic device, which is a raising toy that's only on the Premium and LE games. And then we're going to go back into some game software features, some really cool stuff we did just for Led Zeppelin, like our layered sound effects system, the music-driven mode system. This is a pinball first as far as I've seen, and the beat synchronized lights that we did in the game. And at the end, we will have some time for Q&A with everyone up here from the team, and we actually have some people in the audience too who did help with this game, so if any of your questions go into territory that we can't answer, someone here will be able to do it. So let's talk about kicking off the project. So project was kicked off in the summer of 2019. And when we kick off a project, this means that we're setting the dates from now until when this is hitting production. So this is our program management team led by Danielle Siebert and Mark Wayna, setting a whole spreadsheet of dates we have to hit. We need to make a tooling release date so we can have the parts in here in time for production. And everything at Stern really has to work together because we can't have the game fall behind schedule. So at this point in the project, this is where we put the game team together. Here, the game team at this point was Steve Ritchie as the game designer, myself as the lead game developer, and John Rothermel as the mechanical engineer. And John couldn't be here today, but his job as a mechanical engineer is to actually make all the parts on the game. And he's the one who helps Steve, the designer, kind of make all this stuff come together from concept to actual physical release game. And then one question we've been asked, or people on the team have been asked a bunch, is who picked the song list? So I just want to address this here. Our team, when we kicked off the project, we had the song list as part of the project kickoff. And that means before Steve, myself, John were on the project, actually getting the game together to kick it off, all that stuff that Jody Dankberg does in licensing and our whole executive team, a committee of Led Zeppelin fans in the company all came up with a great song list of some of the best Led Zeppelin songs, great songs for pinball. And so the very first day when we started on the project, we've got a song list, the 10 songs I have listed here. My personal favorite is Whole Lotta Love. I don't know what your guys' favorites. Any favorite Led Zeppelin songs in our song list?
Cashmere for me.
Ramble on.
Immigrant Song.
Yeah, Cashmere.
A lot of Cashmere, nice. Yeah, I think it's a great song. I know my dad's favorite song is Trampled Underfoot, so he was happy to see that one on there. So song list was one of the first things we got on the project. We also got a style guide that sort of shows what the style of Led Zeppelin looks like. And here's just a sampling of some of the merchandise that Led Zeppelin has licensed. And while a lot of the elements here are things you see on the game as it is today, you see the Icarus, the Swan Song logo. That's a huge part of the Led Zeppelin branding. You see the actual Zeppelin, the Hindenburg from the Led Zeppelin 1 album cover. These are all very iconic Led Zeppelin images. What you also notice about Led Zeppelin is they're actually not too heavily involved in a lot of licensing outside of merchandise. So this is a huge step, and got to give credit to our licensing team for actually getting the very first Led Zeppelin pinball machine. Because if you don't know, Led Zeppelin was formed in 1968. 1980, unfortunately, their drummer passes away, and they do very few live performances or any albums ever since then. And Led Zeppelin has lived on with their great music. They're played on the radio, television commercials, every department store. You'll hear Led Zeppelin, but their visual presence, they weren't really around much for the transition to music video in the 80s and stuff like that. But as part of my research with the team is looking at, okay, what is Led Zeppelin today? What is all their branding? What video is out there? And Led Zeppelin is kind of introducing themselves to the next generation of people who have heard them before but don't know too much about the band. So they're doing these history of Led Zeppelin videos, and they've got some of this great classic video footage now on their Spotify, on their YouTube page, on Facebook, on Instagram. And working with Jody and Mark Wayna, we were able to identify, hey, this video stuff, are we going to be able to use this in the game? And, Jody makes some phone calls. Somehow he manages to get real 1960s, 1970s live Led Zeppelin footage in the game for all the 10 songs in the game. And that was something we didn't start with when we first kicked off the project, but it really took the game to the next level. And that's where the AV team comes in and really takes that footage, polishes it, makes it work for the pinball machine. So that was a huge leap forward for the project, and this is still early in the project, summer, fall 2019. And unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but I want to give a huge shout out to Stefan Jensen, the project artist, for making 3 absolutely beautiful art packages. They are everything Led Zeppelin, everything just that the band was about. It was these stark albums that they would put in the record store in the 60s and 70s, and people would see it and they said, I had to have that. They put the record on, they'd hear the music. This is how Led Zeppelin was experienced, and he was able to capture that essence in the pinball machine. And I really think the playfield is absolutely spectacular. I don't know how he managed to do it, but he managed to incorporate a black and white Hindenburg photograph into this incredibly colorful playfield. I think it's just a masterpiece of graphic design and art development. So moving into some of the more technical stuff, let's talk about the expression light device in the cabinet. So the expression lights was initially a concept from the designer. Designer said, hey, I want to have 13 lights in the cabinet. Why 13? Well, 12 notes of the chromatic scale plus the octave. So it was 13 lights initially. And we get to a concept here where we have RGB lights. But at first there was some discussion, are they going to be bright enough? Where are they going to be? Are they going to be illuminating from the back panel? Are they going to be on sides of the cabinet? So this is where our electrical engineering team has to start researching what technology is available, what can we get, how can we make a sample, how can we actually get it to work in our whole entire Spike 2 system. So I have to give credit here to Andrew Pines, Chuck Blake, Simon Sunblade, Jim Sherd, and Raina Cortez, our whole electrical engineering team, for actually making it possible to do this awesome expression lighting system. starting with the concept here, with the 13 lights as you see here, we stacked them vertically. The strips of lights actually come with RGB lights on the top and bottom, and we did a test. Are they bright enough? That was the first thing we needed to see. If we light up RGB lights, what if we just do red? Is it bright enough? And it was. It illuminated the cabinet very well. And so taking this concept, the electrical engineering team actually has to look at what can our system drive? How many lights can we support in this thing? How bright can we go until, we start running into power issues? And they were the ones who were able to realize that we could actually drive, if we develop this new high current node board, we can drive over 400 lights. So there's over 400 lights just in the expression lights that are mounted in the sides of the cabinet today. Let me show you the concept as it is today. Here's a SolidWorks drawing that Elliot gave me. So we took the lights, the original 13 lights, stretched it out as far as it'll go, wound up with, like I said, over 400 lights. And now we need a way to drive this thing. But so this is where, as a lead developer, it's not all just kind of rule sets. Sometimes it's into the technology. So I'm going to show you guys a video here. Which will take me a little bit to get up. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. And how am I going to move this? You guys have anything to say while I'm fiddling around with the computer? The others?
Yeah, I was just going to add that one of our concepts for this whole expression lights was to give you that concert feel. So to turn the whole playfield into this flood of lights to like give you that immersive feel of what the music is.
Yeah, exactly. It was supposed to really connect you to the music. So this video, I made this in March 2020. Now, if you guys are history buffs, you may know some world-changing event that really kicked off in March 2020, which was the real start of the coronavirus pandemic in America, and we were all starting to work from home. So here I am at home with my Black Knight pinball machine. It's my personal Black Knight pinball machine, and I'm sent home with these strips of lights, and I have to make them work. And I have to give credit to another software engineer, Tanya Kleiss. He's amazing at researching all this different technology. He's an amazing software engineer. He and I worked on actually taking some data that we were getting from another program. We'll go into that a bit later, and actually making it work with our lighting system. So here was like my first test in good times, bad times. So yeah, compared to now, very boring, but this is the first time we actually played music-driven light shows in sync in the game, and I'm just laying it out on my Black Knight playfield just to make it work. So I'm going to talk about the two different types of, where's my mouse? The two different types of light shows we actually do in pinball. We have state-driven light shows. So this is like multi-ball is lit. There's a pulsing green light on the playfield. While multi-ball is lit, continue pulsing that light. Just do it forever until the game ends or until you start multi-ball. And there's also state or event-driven light shows. This is, you hit a shot and you get a whole award, the whole playfield. This is a high-priority light show. This takes over. And we sort of needed a third thing. We needed a music-driven light show. So it is like similar to, yeah, your lock's lit, yeah, your song is playing, but the lights are going to be changing in time with the music. And our system right now, you sort of need to be a software developer to actually do the light shows. And for something like this, we really needed a tool. So Tanya and I were researching what tools are out there, how do they do concert light shows? How do they do all this stuff? What we actually wound up finding was a tool called XLites. Not this one, this one. XLites is a program, an open source software program that people use to create Christmas light shows on their houses. So the idea is you take that corner with the playfield, you take a picture of the front of your house, you mark where all your Christmas lights are, and then you do your Carol of the Bells light show. The da 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 da. If you've seen these videos on YouTube and stuff, and this is one of the programs people used to do it. And the great thing we found about this software was it automatically finds beats for you. The licensing with the open source license, it worked for us in the game. And now, after we wrote a tool to convert the output of this program to work with our light system, you don't have to be a C++ software developer to actually create pinball light shows. And Mike Vinikour, incredibly talented, is not a C++ developer, but he actually managed to create all the light shows in this game. So Mike, do you want to talk about your involvement?
Sure. So, you guys hear me? Okay. So one day I'm sitting in my basement because we're all working from home, and I get a phone call from Tanya Kleiss, Tim, and Mark Guidarelli. And I'm minding my own business, and they're like, "Hey, we got to ask you something." I'm like, "All right, what's up?" They're like, "What do you think about taking a stab at doing these expression light shows for Led Zeppelin?" And I was extremely flattered that they asked because, I've never done anything like this before, and I wear a lot of hats at Stern, and I'm always looking to put more hats on and contribute to any kind of game development in any way I can. So they're like, they really upsold me on like, "Hey, you're a part-time concert photographer. You spend more time at rock concerts than anybody we know. If anybody can make this game look like a rock concert with those lights, it's going to be you." So I said, "Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. But if I do a bad job, don't be afraid to tell me, hey, this is not going to work out. And we're going to do it. We'll find somebody else to do it." Thankfully, it did work out. So Tim gave me a bunch of tutorials and stuff on how to use the tool. And then I just sat there. I picked a song I wanted to start with. And I took my first stab at it and I handed it to him, and he goes, "Yeah, this will work. Keep going. Like, I like it." And then after I did a couple more, I went back and looked at that first one and thought it was terrible because it was way too flashy. So when they brought me a development cabinet so I could actually play the game with the real play field with those lights going, so I could see, like, am I blinding myself when I play it? And it turned out the first time, my first light show, I was blinding myself and I couldn't see the ball. So it was a lesson learned on, like, to find the balance between like super flashy, like strobing rock light show and pinball lighting. So you can't have the best of both worlds. So I went through, I took a pass at each one and I would iterate on it and I would hand it to Tim. And when he told me he would like them, I'd move on to the next song and I would call it done. Then I got done with a light show for each song. And then I still was inspired, like, well, I could probably just polish these things forever, or I could see if Tim will make it so I could add more. So we ended up doing a whole second set of songs that I developed because as I kept iterating on them, I wanted to do things, but I liked the stuff I had. So I'm like, just let me do 2 light shows and you'll get double bang for the buck. So it took me a good couple of months, and that was pretty much all I did all day long was develop these light shows. My wife at the time, she was also working from home, and she was working upstairs on the first floor. I'm down in the basement, and she heard, bits and pieces of, like Cashmere, A Whole Lot of Love, you name it. I'd play like 10 seconds of the song as I'm laying out this particular section of effects, and then I'd go back and play it, and I'm getting it just right. So you'd hear the same segments of the song like 100 times in a row. And at one point, she came down to the basement. She goes, "You've really ruined all this music for me, and I can never listen to these songs again because all I hear is the same part over and over all day long." Anyway, so when I was done, I handed it in, and it really, to me, made me feel like I was at a concert, and then I felt like I should have a camera in my hand. So like when I'm playing the thing, I sometimes get lost, and like I'm just like flipping the ball. Yeah, I'm staring at the lights, and I'm just batting the ball around trying to keep it alive, and then I got bummed when I would drain because then the light show would be over. So hopefully we can do that again on another game because I really enjoyed doing it. I like contributing to games. I've contributed rules to certain games and any number of things. This was a whole new world for me, and it really felt good to to learn something new and then to actually see it in the game every time I play it.
So I've got a little demo here of some of Mike's work in the game. It's not completely in sync in the video, but it works better in the game. You got to go play the game on the floor if you want to see it.
Baby, I've been
So like I said, Whole Lot of Love. That's my favorite song.
Yeah, so one other thing. So while the tool would give you some rudimentary beat matching, but for me that was just the start, and then I tweaked every one of those to get it perfect because my OCD wouldn't let it be a little bit off. Like when the beat would happen, if the light didn't flash right when I needed it, I was sitting there tweaking it like a pixel at a time until I got it just right, which is what drove my ex crazy. It was because she goes, "I heard that same beat forever," but it was really important to me that everything was in sync the whole time I played it, and I would sit there and just play the whole song while the ball was in the shooter lane, so I could make sure that everything lined up just how I wanted it.
Sure, and then that device works great in the game, and I want to move on to the Electric Magic device, and this is where we're going to bring in Elliot Eismin,
Hello.
mechanical engineer extraordinaire, whatever title he wants for today.
Just mechanical engineer.
But you want to take us through how the Electric Magic device worked?
Yes.
See if I can get the slideshow to work. There we go.
Oh, there it is. So yeah, I didn't develop the whole layout with Steve or anything like that. I came in later when the project was mostly underway. And so I started with that sketch you see up there from Steve. So he really wanted this device that would rise up from the playfield and then expose some sort of thing. We ended up with a spinner, but some sort of thing, and then be able to catch the ball and then also drive the ball down into the playfield. So it was just challenging from that sort of aspect of you need to have a lot of surfaces level. This is what my brain was doing when he was talking about it. But he gave me this sketch of a circle with a shot through it, and that's as far as he got. So I took those, and this typically happens with a lot of complicated devices and a lot of things that the designers will give us is it'll start with just a very basic sketch and some verbal, hey, I want this to happen. So I took those requirements, and if you go to the next slide. Oh, and I do these rough sketches. So again, we were in a pandemic, so I sketched these at home on a notepad, and I took pictures of them and gave them to John and Steve and the whole mechanical engineering team to say, hey, is this a good idea? So another thing he wanted, as you can see in this sketch I did, that he also wanted the top to light up, which also was another challenge to pull off, but we ended up doing it a different way. But yeah, so as you can see, it kind of matches the concept of what it actually is. So then from there was other challenges. If you want to go to the next one. Other challenges of, can we actually get this magnet to work? Can we actually catch it? So the first thing we did was we put it in a test fixture. This is one of our white woods that we built, and we put it in the game, roughly Road B, so we could shoot at it. Because as you know, the pinballs are very wild and they have varying speeds and all sorts of stuff that we just couldn't predict or calculate. So we set up this test fixture, and then Tim, very quickly wrote a little program to make it work. And I don't know if we have that video. Yeah. Oh yeah. And so here's a video of our first test. So you can very quickly see that it worked at pretty slow speeds, but for a very fast shot, it would not catch the ball. It just was not enough time for that magnet to actually actuate and catch the ball. So we realized we needed to modify the design a bit to add these posts that come up. And that's why on the game, if you've actually studied that mech, there's these two posts that come up. And that's so we could guarantee that we caught the ball every time, because that was really important to the gameplay and the rules. So we'll go to the next one. Oh yeah. From there we built some prototypes, and these are the first prototypes you can see that we built. And really I wanted to show you these kind of initial sketches and initial prototypes of the mechanism and how we work. So one of the things that we try to do as well is we try to iterate as much as possible so that we, get the best assembly or the most robust assembly, or, just improve it as much as possible. So if you go to the next slide.
I wanted to add one of the other requirements was we couldn't keep the magnet on the whole time. So we actually had to recatch it on the magnet too when it came back up. So it had to be strong enough to grab it from like a lock position back onto the magnet.
Oh yeah, that's our first time powering it on, just to make sure the whole thing would work. So that's just on the test bench. But it went through 3 iteration processes to get it to where it is now, and doing various tweaks and various things. So one of the things that when we first laid it out, it was a bit too narrow. So we shot it a bunch. We kind of liked it, but we opened it up a little bit because we felt adding an extra 1/4 inch makes a world of difference in the pinball machine. So you can see from number 2 to number 3, it actually got wider. That was to make that shot just a little bit easier for everyone. And because we really wanted this device to be fun to play and not be frustrating. If you go to the next one. And this is another important point that I wanted to bring up was, along with iterating, we found some things that we wanted to improve, but we did that through testing. So these are some of the early videos of it integrated into the play fields, kind of just showing that it goes up and down. And then on the right is actually our full test fixture. So we test all of our mechs through their paces in the game. Yeah. No, that was a little distracting. Sorry. So we try to test the mechs as accurately in the game as possible. So we will set up, you can see that distance there was picked from the fact that it sits there on the play field, and then the flippers are down there, so where they are normally on the game. And so we try to replicate any sort of forces or gameplay or anything like that through testing. But we'll set up these automated test fixtures to do all that for us, and we can cycle through a bunch of cycles in a quicker amount of time so that we know they'll be robust. Because one of the things that I was really concerned on this mech was it surviving and not binding or crashing or anything like that when you hit it, because it was out in the open, it was going to be bashed, it was going to be put through hell. So I wanted to make sure that worked, and that's what we did through testing. And I think in the end, it turned out pretty well. I was really happy with the way it worked. I was really happy with the performance of everything. And yeah, it was good. That's all I have to say.
Sorry, I have to figure out how to get the other slideshow back up now.
Well, we got it pertains to this. So when you guys decided to put the spinner in there, was it always intended to be the opto spinner? I'm in love with the opto spinners, by the way. That's why I'm asking. But or did you start with the normal spinner and then change it to the opto spinner?
So I started with the opto spinner just because it needed to have a certain package, and so we wanted to make that shot as wide as possible. But we didn't want we didn't want to raise the whole play field or anything. So to make it as thin as possible, I'm like, well, let's just go for the opto spinner because everyone likes that anyways. And then we can integrate some of the other sensors because it needs an entrance and an exit, both sensing things. So it just ended up packaging really well.
So now I'm going to get up again because we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, the rules. Not a big applause for the rules. Yeah, there we go. So, Stern Pinball, we do a lot of licensed games. I joined Stern Pinball about 4 years ago. And I was really excited to work on licensed games because it's a huge advantage. Immediately, you have the power of the brand behind you. And really, it's up to you if you're a fan of it too. And I'm a fan of Led Zeppelin's music, to just take your love for it, put your passion in the game, and create something cool. And sometimes stuff comes along that you weren't expecting. And in this game, the 4 band member symbols, they all had to be of equal weight. So I got me thinking, and I came up with a rule. I said, well, what if all the 4 band member symbols worked as a multiplier system? And I had this idea to do a fractional multiplier system where it wasn't 2 times playfield or 3 times playfield. Like, why not like 30% more? Why not 70% more? This is represented in the Icarus multiplier rule. And also, just so happened that as Steve laid out the playfield, he laid out 4 target banks. And I said, okay, 4 band members, 4 symbols. Maybe each of the target banks could correspond to this. And then they all have to work together, all the 4 symbols. So you light all 4 of them, you start the multiplier, and that builds your big multiplier system. So this is really more of a rule for players who really want to get in deep. And, you know, with people, so many people bringing the games home or playing in tournaments, a lot of people like having a lot of layers to the rule set to keep, you know, putting it all into each other. So it's more of an advanced rule, but I think it turned out really well. It's just a cool thing that came about from the development. But going more to the core elements of the game, so I'm going to jump back in time to sort of the research phase of the game. And when I am first listening to Led Zeppelin music, I'm noticing that they have a very typical rock song structure to their songs. I'll play it here. I lost the slideshow. So what I was showing you there was that when Led Zeppelin play a chorus or a verse, they're going to come back to it with a variation. They're going to play it again. And this was the direction development was going, was this is going to be a music-driven game. We're going to have music driving the light shows. We're going to have music driving the stuff. Why don't we have the music drive the shots on the playfield? And if I can bring my slideshow back up, I'll show you a cool thing about how we did this. But this is where Raymond actually joined Stern in the middle of the project. So you want to talk about how you got involved in even the project itself?
Yeah, so I was just finishing up some work on Avengers and then jumped right into Led Zeppelin. And first thing was basically we got 10 songs. I made one mode that you can look at. Now make the other 9. So I'm like, okay, all right. And so I learned how to use the little song software here, which corresponds to the different changes from verse to verse, which then gets translated into the game as, okay, now you're in a verse, now you're in a chorus, and then your song shots will change. And so I had to come up with rules that were not too crazy or convoluted, but also that were interesting enough so that each song had enough differentiation, you know, and also, if possible, maybe thematically fit the parts of the song. Of course, like when you get a guitar solo, then it's just rip that center ramp as many times as you can. And kind of envision myself doing an air guitar of just, you know, it's that sort of thing. So, yeah, it was really fun to tweak and implement all those song modes.
Yeah, so this is a graphical representation of the sections of the song. And like Raymond was saying, the idea was to actually have what it feels like in the song. When you're in an awesome guitar solo and you want to air guitar, it was Raymond's idea to say, let's just jam out on the center ramp, right? Hit it from the left flipper as many times as you can in a row and get all the points. And then when you go back into a chorus, typically all the shots are lit because this is the familiar part of the song. So we're trying to take the elements of the music and incorporate it in the rule set. And I think the way the game turns out, and you guys may have differing opinions, that I think it really feels like when you're playing the game, you feel like you're playing along with the music. You feel like you're jamming out. And I get into a point where I'm playing the game, and if I start hitting my shots, yeah, kind of like my brain turns off. I don't even feel like I'm playing pinball anymore. I just kind of feel like I'm part of almost like a concert experience in the game. So I just did Immigrant Song. That was like my first one. And I said, hey, Raymond, new guy on the team, new guy to Stern. By the way, you joined in May, I believe, 2020.
Yeah.
So Raymond was also working remotely from the beginning, so never really got to see what was going on until suddenly we just give him a Led Zeppelin playfield and we say, hey, work on this. And I'm telling him, hey, download this thing and put this together. And this is how we're going to make the songs work. And luckily, Raymond, as the current number one player in the world, is very familiar with game rule sets and was able to dive right in and really make something fun from the get-go. And also, so sound engineer Bob Baffy worked with Corey on actually taking some other elements of the music and making that part of the game. So you want to talk about that, Corey?
Sure. So we wanted to, in the past, we've done a lot of music games, and each game we've learned how to integrate that music a little bit better or different or make it more part of the experience. And with Led Zeppelin, we knew these expression lights were going to be part of the game, and this new rule idea where the music was going to drive that. So what can we add on top of what we've already done with our other music games to make this even a more integrated experience? Maybe one you don't even notice, right? Maybe you don't notice why you're having fun or why it's part of that experience, but to do it behind the scenes so it's much more seamless. And Tim and Bob and I talked about how do we better integrate the music as driving those individual event light shows as well. So not just the expression lights, but also all of the mode lights, and make them part of that experience where it's very iconic. It fits their music style, follows, as Tim said, all the bridge and the chorus, and you can feel it move. Like you said, you may not even notice that it's doing it, but watch the game. It's doing it. And we also wanted to push that the sound engineer could work within their environment, so their tool chain, something that they're familiar with, but then allow the software engineers to then integrate it into the game finally. So we actually built two things. We built something that follows the beat and the style of or the chorus or the riffs, and annotates all those, which all those had to be done by hand. Led Zeppelin music was built using probably 4-track recorders, maybe 8 and 12 tracks, but nothing fancy, nothing computer. So the stuff is off. Like they would clearly splice stuff together. You can if you put it on a screen, you can see where it's just slightly skewed, and I'm sure that was what was driving Mike's OCD crazy, whereas he's having to move it a pixel at a time because you did it wasn't accurate, but it sounds good, so they left it. But with modern music, it would clearly be very, very syncopated, and so we got that to work with the light shows, and then we also added a feature of being able to match the sound effects to the key or the chord that's being played in the music. So as the chord or as the key of the music changes, we wanted the sound effects to match so that they didn't clash. The sound effects had to had to work with the game. And I don't want to speak for Bob, who's not here, but it's very difficult when you have a music game that's iconic. You can't put sound effects they can't be musical because that's not Led Zeppelin playing a little riff, but they also have to fit and not be out of place with pinball. And so we said, okay, well, how do we make that work? Plus, then when you're playing those and you're hitting a spinner or drop targets and it's da da da, and the music changes pitch behind it, you don't want that to clash. And so we built a whole subsystem that allows us to track those chords and then play the correct sound effects when they're supposed to be played, and actually shift real time as well in the middle of those chords changing, which had its own challenges. But that allowed everything when all that kind of came together with Tim's rules, the expression lights all coming together, and all of that being a package, all sort of just fell together and made the game really fun.
Yeah, and just briefly to tell you what's on the screen here, Bob actually by hand lays out beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, tapping it out exactly on his keyboard because they didn't play to a metronome. That lets us fill in on these top sections, like this is probably a solo, and then this is a grace period from the previous song, this is pinball stuff, and then here's the cue lights to actually lead you in. So this beat system actually let us do the whole sound system, and then down here the bottom row, he's tracking all the guitar chords in the game, and that means if a sound effect is requested, it will play it in that pitch, in that key. And I have some more highlights from Raymond's involvement in the project. I don't know if you want to go through these, Raymond.
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned, I was a support programmer, so basically just got to fill out things that needed to be filled out. And so song modes was my first thing. So not only the where the shots are, but also how they score, the progression of the game in terms of getting records and building your song value. The tour multi-ball rules, Tim brought to me and said, so there's 4 different tour multi-balls. I help me out here. I don't know. Should they be different multi-balls? Should be the same multi-ball? How do we make them kind of cohesive, but not get repetitive? And so I did a couple of things. I made it so that they were 4 different multi-balls, but the jackpot value carries through them, so you feel like you're making progress towards the tour, and then they build towards the world tour, which Tim had as the wizard mode. And I think they turned out really well, and they're all kind of variations of, like a target's one, a ramp's one, a switch's one. And so just using broad concepts and then build on those to build the 4 different tour multi-balls. I also did the wizard mode rules for Mothership multi-ball, which was actually not originally planned. And then we sort of came up with this idea of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have something someone can go for that's halfway to the top of the charts? And I thought that added, that Tim thought it was great. He was like, yes, let's do that. And it turned out really fun. You see all those super jackpots, fireworks going and stuff. And so that was really fun to work on. The final wizard mode, Carl D'Angelo actually has said it's his favorite, maybe his favorite wizard mode. So I'm really proud of that one. I borrowed a couple of rules from my experience playing games I like, and kind of picked and choosed and came up with my own little additions. And then the action button, came up with that because we weren't using it and we didn't know what to do. And I thought it'd be cool if it did something different based on whether you're in multi-ball or in single ball play, because that hadn't been done before. Usually a button is a button is a button. But now you have to choose, do I want to use my button in single ball play, or do I want to use it as an add ball in multi-ball? And then...
and I want to interrupt because with that, we were noticing how sometimes top level players can really make a game boring, and they could do the same thing over and over again. And we don't want that to happen. We want everyone to show all the shots on the playfield, all the rules, all the modes. So we created with that rule, or you really created incentives to change your song and go through the entire set list, because it gives you a really powerful button item, the span boost, right?
Yeah, it solved two birds with one stone, where I really wanted, we had that scoop at the up top, and early on we kind of decided like, okay, that should probably be where you can change your song. And we're like, why do we want to change our song? And it was like, well, we also need an action button rule. What if we give them 2 action buttons every time they change their song, so they're encouraged to try to get up there before the song ends? Because if the song ends, what's cool is, actually we didn't even touch on this, the music's always playing. Even when your song ends, it goes to the next song, and that's awesome. But now you have that incentive to try to beat the song and try to get up top to claim those 2 action buttons, and so that ended up working out really well.
And this was done later on, because at first we're focusing on the very first level, the street level. When you're putting the game on location, are you going to be able to dive in and get some points and have some fun? So that's why after we release the game and we're seeing how people are reacting to it, we're adding on these more complex rules, because the base of the game by that point is pretty solid.
Right, and that's like why you start with the song modes, the main draw to the game, and then you build on it. It was a really cool process, and I got to see it, firsthand joining Stern. Basically, even though I joined, you said it started in 2019, so I joined
right after Black Knight, yeah.
Yeah, so I joined kind of late in the project, but for me, it felt early from a software rules kind of perspective. The only other last bullet on here is I did the Electric Magic Frenzy mode on the premium. Everyone seems to like the
That's my favorite mode in the game.
Yeah, it's really fun, and part of that was due to the awesome sounds Bob Effie provided. And Tim, was it your idea to have the growing, which you spin?
Yeah, I told him we needed the sound effects to go up by a third of a semitone every time you reach a certain progress thing, and he iterated maybe 5 or 6 times. He delivered sound effects, and we kept sending it back until it sounded just right. So we made him work pretty hard on that.
But it turned out great, because now when you rip that super jackpot, it's like you're strumming chords and points are flying. It's a frenzy. Super fun. So yeah.
So that's all we have on the presentation, but we got about 10 minutes left. So I'd like to know if there's any questions from people, and maybe David will be able to hand people microphones.
I'm going to start off with my question or comment. Particularly for Mike, the flashing lights, if they're too bright, there's another problem, and it will not come across well on streaming because Auto Iris will overreact to the change in brightness. And I hope you guys are thinking now about the future of pinball is going to be a camera overhead, and it has to be comprehensible, not just from the player point of view, but also overhead, so it looks good on television.
Mike, I can talk to this. This is actually at our systems level. So Mark Guidarelli, our systems engineer, added a scaling brightness value for all the cabinet lights. So you can go in the system adjustments and scale the brightness of the light shows. It will scale all the light shows to a maximum of a certain brightness. So it can still be shown without overpowering on a stream, or if someone has sensitive light environment, they can make those changes.
Thank you. You guys are very good. About how long from start to finish do you think it took you to complete all the lights and the music? And I was just wondering if you guys were able to, get along with each other while you were doing this.
So I believe it when start to finish. So from my point of view, March 2020 was when I first had that prototype of the lights. And I was working mostly on the software to make that work, and then a few of the light shows. But then the concept changed when we were able to go to the full strips of lights, so we kind of went to Mike at that point to fill in the light shows. And Mike, you could talk about how long you worked on it.
So I believe it took me roughly 2 full months of 5-day long days. And I put all my other work on hold, basically. I told the other teams, I have to focus on this until it's done because we have to ship at a certain time. So it all in, it was about 2 months. And that was for 2 fully polished light shows for every single song. Oh, we get along famously. I this is a total shoot. I love every single person I work with at Stern, and it's the only job where I could say there's not a single person I don't get along with. I get along with everybody. I think they're fantastic to work with. We have an amazing department at Stern, and that just keeps growing. And it's a testament to George Gomez of his eye for talent, and he's great at assembling good, talented people.
I have a quick question about the expression kit. I have 2 pros en route that I want to buy those for, but I can't find them anywhere. Do you know if Stern's going to make more of them?
I'm hearing yes from us. So.
Hey, I noticed in this game that it plays the full songs, and I have a lot of these rock and roll games at my place, and this seems to be fairly unique. I was wondering what the thought process was behind that, and do you think we'll be seeing that again in further rock and roll type releases?
The thought process was we wanted to play the full song, I guess. I think with the song list, as I talked about, all of those songs are high energy songs. So the whole song works really well for pinball. As far as, what things have happened in the past, technology has changed. It's going to be different on every game. It's a game-to-game situation, but I imagine we'll see some full songs in the future, yeah.
Some of that is driven by design, like in Aerosmith, our song modes were timed. So you got to hear a lot of the song and you could extend your timer pretty long. But a game like Kiss, like you hear the full song all the time, and unless you choose to pick a different song when you get far enough along. Metallica is another example that used full songs.
All right, I guess you told them everything they needed to know. Thanks very much.